Sheep are better than goats, period. And that's just a simple fact. It's not my personal opinion, it's just a simple fact. In fact, I have 7 facts to bring to you about why sheep are better than goats. Now, if you're new to the channel, my name is William, and this channel is the Permaculture Consultant. And that's exactly what I am. I am a permaculture design consultant. I've been to a bunch of homesteads, I've been to a bunch of farms, ranches, even backyards, and I've seen a lot of different properties, and I've consulted on a lot of different properties. And one of the questions that comes up very frequently is, should I get goats? I have new growth forests. Should I get goats to clear them? I want meat and milk. Should I get goats? I have pastures I want to maintain. Should I get goats? I just want a simple farm companion. Should I get goats? And the correct answer is absolutely not in 99% of the circumstances. Goats are not easy to keep on your farm, and they're less helpful than you might think. Let's get into them. Now remember, if you need a permaculture consultation, hit up the email down below. Also, if you want to give to the Hurricane Helene Relief Fund, hit up the link down below. It's all in the description. All right, so this first thing is something that a lot of new homesteaders or new farmers, a lot of people who hire me, aren't aware that they have to do when it comes to the maintenance of sheep and goats, and that's hoof trimming. Hoof trimming, sorry. Hoof trimming is way easier on sheep than it is on most goats. First of all, goats are super playful and mischievous. So if they have a chance to sneak up on you and ram you, that's exactly what they're gonna do. So if you're on the ground, or if you have the goat stood up, or whatever the circumstance might be, but if you're on the ground and you're trimming the hooves of a particular goat, you just became a target for the rest of the goats. And they're gonna come and try to headbutt you, they're gonna try to play with you and stuff like that. Just the issue is that we're not built like goats. We don't have like a thick skull and horns to, you know, ram them back or anything. Also, depending on the angle of the horns, they might just, you know, end up poking you. Sheep, you don't have that same concern. I've been rammed by a sheep while on the ground like once. And it wasn't even that hard. They don't ram as hard, and a lot of the varieties, unless it's a ram, don't have the horns that you have to worry about. So when it comes to hoof trimming, and also with sheep, I've heard that you do that a lot less frequently than you do with goats. Also, it's a little bit easier on the clippers with the sheep than it is the goats. So take that for whatever you will. The hoof trimming on sheep is a lot easier than goats. That's something a lot of new people don't know that they have to do whenever it comes to the upkeep of sheep and goats. Now here's one that I'm sure some of you guys have heard of before, and that it's impossible to fence in a goat. Greg Judy, who's a famous grazer, rancher, has made the statement that if water can flow through a fence, so can a goat. This right here is field wire, woven wire, field fence, and then on the other side of this is, what is it, five strands of barbed wire. That keeps these cows in that's on the other side of this fence, no problem at all. But a goat will view this as a freaking challenge. And if there's anything on this side of the fence that he wants to eat, he's gonna get there. He's gonna do it. Now let's say you do the movable electrified netting, which is what I recommend with most cases when it comes to grazing sheep or goats or any kind of ruminant, is rotating them properly with the electrified netting. An example here on this property, this was about maybe 6-7 years ago. We got a pair of goats out here to help clean up the brush and try to, you know, put a dent in all the new growth forest. We had them in electrified sheep netting, and the goat would stick its head through the netting, continuously get shocked, and still eat what's on the other side, even though he's on fresh new pasture. That's just an example of how goats can be a pain, and if you put up a fence in front of them, they are going to get through. Sheep, on the other hand, if their buddies are inside the fence, the sheep want to stay inside the fence. Very rarely do you have sheep that just willy-nilly escape from your fence, especially the electrified netting. In comparison to goats, goats actively try to get past this fence, any kind of fence. Sheep won't really test the fence unless you have not moved them in a very long time and they're out of food on their forage. And they really won't do it if all their other buddies, like I said before, are still within the fence. Sheep are just very well behaved whenever it comes to that. They're docile. Goats are freaking borderline evil. Now this one is a big one. This is the issue of worming. So this is another thing that a lot of new homesteaders and farmers don't know that they're getting into whenever they get livestock, and that's the parasite load. Now, goats, where I live here, and in most of the cases in North America, unless you're in a very arid climate, they are going to have issues with worming and parasites. It's something that you're going to have to more frequently do, is worm them. If you do not worm your goats, I've seen one example, and it's my father-in-law, where he gives no mind to the goats and their parasites. And that's because they're in a paddock that has a bunch of black walnuts in it. And the goats are essentially worming themselves by eating the hulls of the black walnuts. That's the only circumstance I've ever seen where you don't have to worry about worms with goats. Now, with sheep, if I rotate them properly through my pastures, I don't have to worry about parasites if I go with hair sheep, specifically hair sheep. Wool sheep, they are kind of prone to parasites, especially in more humid climates that are warmer as well. Wool sheep are more prone to parasites, but hair sheep are parasite resistant. And as long as I rotate them through my property, for example, I'm in between the swales right here. There's a swale over there. There's a swale right here. And whenever I do rotate ruminants through here, they rotate between the swales. And then they don't visit the place, they don't visit that paddock for minimum 30 to 60 days. If I were to follow that same pattern with goats, they would still get worms. They would still get parasites, which is one of the downsides. You want as little outside inputs on your animals as possible. If your farm can provide everything that animal needs, then you have a more resilient farm and a more profitable farm as well. And then also, let's talk about the effects of worming on your soil. So if I keep worming my goats because they're, you know, prone to parasites and they're gonna die if I don't worm them, if I keep worming them, it passes through their system, they poop it out, and then it hits the soil. Now, the downside of that worming, what does worming do? What does ivermectin do? It gets rid of parasites. It gets rid of the microbes that are in that animal system. It also gets rid of the microbes in the soil, which is the opposite effect that you want on your pastures. You want as much microbial activity in your pastures as absolutely possible. And the worming effect, the effects of the worming solutions, are going to be counterproductive to what you're doing. Healthier pasture means healthier animals, and that's, you know, counterproductive if I'm constantly killing the pasture or killing the microbes in the pasture to keep my animals alive. Here's another reason. Goats literally stink, especially the rams, or the bucks, my bad. The bucks stink. Like when it's rutting season, goats freaking stink. Also, they pee on themselves, which makes them even funkier. That's a whole, like, you can't even, okay, let's say you find goats cute. You can't even go cuddle him because he's all funky, and then you're going to come back to the house all funky, and then everything you touch is going to be funky. So that's a simple one, but goats stink. Now, this one is going to bust some of the lies and the myths around goats. Because, like, one thing that everybody thinks about goats is like, oh, they'll eat everything. I can put them in my overgrown property, and then they'll just knock down everything. False. Goats are picky eaters. If it ain't something like this privet or like all of your landscaping flowers and stuff, all of those guys, or this, they'll eat like multiflora rose sometimes if they feel like it. If it's not a woody species, a goat basically doesn't want anything to do with it, and that's not even the case with all woody species. Okay, for example, over here, if I had goats and I gave them access to this entire pasture over here, they're gonna run to those trees over there and probably girdle a good number of them, and then also eat whatever woody species are growing down around the base of the tree, and they're gonna ignore the pasture for the most part. That's just not what goats eat. Sheep, on the other hand, will go from the pasture, and then they'll come over to the woods, and then they'll go back and forth, and then they'll eat a wider variety of the stuff that you want them to eat. Their diet is just way more diverse than goats. Goats are generally picky eaters. Sheep love most of it. They love pasture, they love browsing, they love grazing, they love all of it. And in fact, sheep are almost bulletproof, as told by the World Shepherd over in South Carolina. Sheep are almost bulletproof if they have access to pasture over here and new growth forest over here. This is actually part of the swales, but you get the point. Goats are picky, don't get them. Now, these next 2 points are gonna kind of go hand in hand, and that is because they both have to do with taste. So let's talk about the meat first. Sheep tastes better than goat. There's a lot of people who love the taste of mutton or lamb over goat. Goat seems to have like a little bit of a gaminess to a lot of people, whereas the sheep and the lamb does not. And also, if you go to hair sheep, then the flavor just skyrockets. Hair sheep tastes way better than wool sheep, and wool sheep still tastes way better than goat. Like, for example, if I had a choice between hair sheep or beef, I'm going with hair sheep every single time. It is just a fantastic tasting animal. Hair sheep wins when it comes to the taste of meat. Now let's talk about dairy, because that's something else a lot of people get into these two for. Now, there are more varieties of goat that will produce milk in a way that you can actually harvest, but sheep make milk taste better. Again, it's higher in fat. The milk tastes way better. The cheese tastes way better than goat milk. Also, sheep is easier to bottle and put away and store and use than goat milk is. Goat milk, for example, you have to, as soon as you get the milk from the udder, you have to bottle it and start lowering the temperature almost immediately, or the goat milk is going to start tasting, it's going to start tasting like gamey, as well as start picking up, like, let's say you don't bottle it immediately, it's going to start picking up flavors from the surrounding area. And chances are you're not milking in like the best tasting area. So that's something to keep in mind of whenever it comes to milking and meat. Sheep just wins both categories. Also, let's say you're in the market of selling the meat, unless you live in a very, I should say, like ethnically diverse community or an area, there aren't going to be a whole lot of people that are wanting to buy goat. It's just how it is. So now, one of the benefits of goat, and this doesn't have anything to do with meat or milk, is that more people show, like for FFA and stuff like that, or 4-H, more people show goats than they do sheep. Why? I have no idea, because, you know, sheep just wins. Remember, goats suck. Now, having said all this, I hope you don't think that I, you know, dislike goats. I can't stand them. That's what it is. They stink. They are uncooperative. I don't, as a farmer, and people who, you know, somebody who consults for other farmers, don't make the job any harder than it has to be. And that's constantly what goats do. Very rarely do they fit within the design of a permaculture system or a permaculture farm. They typically create more problems than they solve. And that's not something I want when it comes to the design or for my clients or for myself. I don't want something that's going to make this job harder. Sheep make the job easier. They clear stuff that I don't want to clear. By hand, if at all possible. They cooperate whenever I move them in a fence. If I move the leader of those sheep, the rest of the sheep are going to follow. That's not the case with goats. Goats are way more independent. They're more likely to scatter and off and do their own thing. Also, they're looking to constantly get out of the fence. These are just some considerations when you should take whenever you're looking at getting a new animal for your farm or homestead, especially if you've never raised animals this kind of way before. So hopefully this video was helpful for you guys. Hopefully you found it a little bit humorous as well. There are obviously circumstances where goats fit into the equation, but more times than not, especially in this part of the world, goats just don't do well as sheep. So thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time, we'll see you.